Congratulations on this.
Thank you very much.
I live here, so I saw it a few weeks ago, and I can't stop thinking about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Good. It's wonderful, isn't it?
It's really wonderful. I love that David is making movies that are in no way compromised by anything. He is making the movies that he sees in his head.
Yeah.
And I think they're genius.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I do. I think he's an extraordinary filmmaker, a real visionary, and somebody whose work I've always so admired. And the fact that he has such an enormous intellect and imagination, and yet manages to be he's so humane, so approachable and delightful and funny. And
funnier than you think he's going to be.
He's so funny. Yeah. Did you hear him last night? Were you at the he just introduced everybody, and he was talking about kissing Rob Pattinson, and it was really funny. Anyway, he's great. Yeah.
Well, that will make the internet explode
right?
today, so I'll have a look for it. Let's talk about your character, Havana. When I first saw Havana, I thought, oh, I've seen her before. There's a vibe about her that, and for work, I'm occasionally in Los Angeles, and I've seen Havana going in and out of the couch store. I've seen her lined up to get into the Ivy. All that stuff. You live in New York, I think, right?
I do.
So I don't really think of you as a Hollywood actress, but you've certainly spent time out there, and so did you? I mean, was Havana the result of just having soaked in the atmosphere out there, or is she based on specifics?
Havana was on the page, man.
Really?
I mean, that was what was great about it. Bruce Wagner's language is so precise, so spectacular, so emotional. So, I mean, it was almost like poetry. I mean, it sounds crazy, but there was a rhythm to it. I felt like I could hear the rhythm. I could hear her voice in the rhythm of the speech and how the things were supposed to be delivered. My biggest concern with doing Havana, I have these rants, and they should just sound conversational. But as an actress, that means I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to learn that page, and it should be like, and I should be able to be like, la, 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 And so I spent a lot of time really focusing on the language and on the delivery of the language and where she was coming from vocally and emotionally. But I swear to you, it's like she sprung to life from the page.
Even the duck lips? I love the duck lips.
Thank you very much.
I love the duck lips. And because for me, again, with my limited experience of being there, it's the only place in the world that I see that.
Well, David and I talked about that, and I even talked, that's why I dyed my hair blonde. I was like, we were on the phone, and I'm like, she can't be a redhead. That's just not what she would be, to have this long blonde, which was crazy to do. I'm like, okay. And then the whole kind of presentation of the makeup, constant makeup, and Denise Cronenberg and I worked very closely on that barely being dressed kind of thing, and the colorful carelessness of it all, sort of like it's like the studied but unstudied sexuality, and a kind of a lack of adultness to her. I mean, that's the key to me to Havana, is that she's so childlike, that she's at a case of arrested development. Everything's all about her mother and about not being parented. So all of this behavior, all of this like childish, even sex pop behavior, the look at me, the need, is all about not being parented, and that's all she wants.
Well, see, what I thought about her while I was watching it is that I had imagined a little backstory for her, that she's been famous. Her mom was famous, so she's been kind of well known before she started acting. Probably as a child, she was in the magazines and things anyway. And I kept thinking of something that George Clooney said years ago, where he said, when you get famous, you get stuck at the age at which you get famous.
Oh,
and so, Clooney was 35, 36, whatever, something like that, when he got really famous. So he had a chance to grow up.
Right.
Other people, 16-year-olds who get really famous, 14-year-olds who get really famous, don't get a chance to grow up in a world that they understand normal things. That's what I thought about
with Havana. That's interesting. I thought too. I actually thought that she probably stuck at the age where her mother died.
Yeah, maybe so.
So
yeah.
it's just that it's that kind of thing, and so it's interesting that the child becomes a tyrant too, because first you have all this empathy for her because she is so childlike, and you're like, oh God, and then when you realize how bottomless her need is and how voracious she is, the more she gets filled up, the stronger she gets, and the more she wants. And then she's this horrific, tyrannical person.
Okay. The line for me that summed up everything that I need to know about her comes later in the film, and this doesn't give anything away, I don't think. But you and Robert Pattinson have sex in the car, in the backseat of the car, sort of in an awkward-looking kind of position in a way, and things. And then she straightens herself up, and she gets out the door, and she says to him, "You go over the seat. Don't go out the door." And that said to me,
exactly
everything exactly who she is right there.
Oh, I know. And well, even in that scene too, where she's like, "Am I better than her?"
Yeah.
It's like she has to. Yeah, it's always like, "Am I better? Do you want me more?
Yeah.
Do I get more? Can I have this? I'm better."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
So I interviewed Robert yesterday, and he told me that when he first started going to Los Angeles, whenever that would have been, 10, 12 years ago, he said he would walk into clubs, and he said you'd see 14-year-olds doing blow, because he said the idea being that if you were famous, the rules just simply didn't apply for you, no matter how old you are, young or old. Any of that in your experience, in the sense of anything that you might have seen? Because you'd been there a bit longer than him. He says now it's over because everyone's got a cell phone, and so you take pictures.
I'm pretty bourgeois. I mean, and I was only in LA. I only lived in LA for a while in the '90s,
right.
And I did feel what was interesting, and we didn't have cell phones then either. There was a different quality to socializing than I'd ever seen before. Because I'm not a partier. I don't really go out.
I don't see you as nightclubby.
No, never. And so I had lived in New York for a long time, and I was always working, but I didn't do any of the discos or any. I just didn't do that stuff. And when I moved to LA, there was a degree of socialization and. Slight, there was just I was just like, wow, there are a lot of parties out here, I think also I was single and I was out in a way that I hadn't been before, and then very soon after that I met my husband and we had children and I went right back into my hole. So but I do think that there could be, and I think in any business, I'm sure it happens at Wall Street and then in Silicon Valley and in certain socialite, I think there can be a permissiveness or something,
Well, it's money, I guess, right? It boils down to money and fame. Money and fame mean power. I guess, right?
You're absolutely right. I'm really glad that you said that, because people keep trying to kind of pin it on Hollywood as if that's the only place, and of course it's not.
No, listen. Look at just to think about stuff. I mean, House of Cards is a television show.
Yeah.
But politics is dirty as the worst. And look at our mayor.
I know. And this is one of the greatest cities in the world.
Yeah.
An exemplary city, and I'm like, how the heck did this happen?
Yeah. It won't be going on for much longer. So the election's coming. So, when in my review of this, which I wrote shortly after seeing it, I said, "This is the most sun-dappled movie that David Cronenberg has ever made, but don't be fooled by that because it's also his darkest."
Yeah.
And I do think that that is true. I mean, even with The Dead Zone and The Fly and Cosmopolis, which was so venal, this is even more so, I think. You know?
I've been talking a lot about how David, I think, has a sort of Brechtian remove in his filmmaking that I think is really fascinating. And he has an intellectual rigor and a way of looking at what people are experiencing. Like, I think all the way back to Existence, which is just so remarkable, where you're kind of like, what's happening? And then it's like, pow! And this one, because the language is so rich and so funny, there's such funny kind of stuff, and you're so outside it, you're really, really entertained by it. And there's this rollicking ride through these people and these wonderful personalities. And I think about the detailed character work that everybody does in this and how delightful they are. Watching Mia and Rob together.
Mia's unbelievable.
Isn't she wonderful, man?
So good in this.
It's so, beautiful, beautiful performance. And so you watch all this stuff, and then what you're not prepared for is the depth of feeling at the end. I think, and then you're just like, oh, the destruction. The way these people have laid waste to one another, and the loss. So that feeling of how the pursuit of all that, and that's what movies are for.
Yeah.
They're metaphor, they're allegory, they're ways for us to like look at ourselves in the frame of something else, and say like, oh well, where am I objectifying stuff? Where am I seeking for something out here? Where am I missing the point down here? And he does end it at the end when that little boy when Evan is talking, just like.
Well, it's almost biblical. Mm-hmm. Particularly the ending of the story. There's an altar, even, and burnt ashes, offerings around.
Sacrifice.
I mean, it really is.
So who have you sacrificed? Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps. It makes me so sad.
When you were first given this, you said it jumped off the page. The character, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
Was it? And I guess it's. The challenge is great. That's what drives you. You always choose interesting things.
Right.
But was there ever a moment where you thought, I don't know, maybe it's too much, maybe it's too venal, maybe it's too. No.
I thought it was so human too.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it as venal. I actually thought, well, because with Havana particularly, I always had a great degree of sympathy for her, just as a human being. She's, like I said, she's monstrous and childlike and stuff.
Yeah.
But I thought I understand. She didn't seem to. I understood her.
Yeah.
I totally understood her degrees of her loss, and also her sense of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. I understood it, and so therefore I was like, it's only when I get worried is when I don't see something supported in language or with a director, and then I'm like, how am I supposed to do something here? There's nothing real here. There's no language. There's no story. There's no Then I'm like, I can't do this. And people say, do whatever you want, and I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way. And even in the scene where you find out that you've just gotten this part that you have been coveting, and through kind of unfortunate circumstances, and there's a moment where you're elated, sad at first, and then elated. And at first I thought, oh, she's just the worst person in the world. But no. You know what? No, I don't think so.
No.
I think that it was maybe an inappropriate human response, but it's a human response.
She was human.
And it made sense to the character.
Exactly.
That's what it. I didn't go, well, that came out of nowhere.
Yes.
Or that
you saw her be able to do that, and you actually even saw her feel a moment of like real horror, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, and then it's like, well, now what?
Yeah.
So it's like I've gone from this happened, but then that happens all the time. Every single, it's.
It's an amazing scene, though.
Yeah, I know.
It's an amazing scene.
Who's great is Dawn. Who plays the agent?
Yeah, oh yeah.
She's wonderful too.
Yeah.
She was really.
Well,
really wonderful.
She looked to me like was a real, like she just stepped out of that world.
I know.
Like she reminded me. Last year, I guess. Bette Midler plays Sue Mengers on stage.
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah,
I didn't see it.
So good. And she struck me as that sort of like been around Hollywood forever, knew how to make the phone calls, knew how to, that person. And there's a lot of them, I think. But they're a real character, and I thought she was fantastic.
She was great. She's from Toronto. Yeah.
Is she?
She's Canadian.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
She was David. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Isn't that
I did
cool?
not know that. That's very cool. Wow.
I know.
Yeah.